Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tori Brame and this is Holy City Mystic. So this has been a request I've gotten quite a bit since I started this channel, and it is to do a video on the Hammer of Thor. Now, what is a Hammer of Thor? It is also known as an iron yod. I briefly mentioned this in another video I did. You can follow the link below where I talk about the classic yod, the quintile yod, which is the golden yod, and then the iron yod. So another name for the iron yod is a Hammer of Thor. Now, as far as the exact degrees and angles of a Hammer of Thor, it's 135 degrees on each side pointing to the apex, and then the smaller end of the triangle is going to be 90 degrees. Now, in order to talk about how this acts as a whole, I really have to break down the square and sesquiquadrates. So a square is a square. A lot of people know it as a negative aspect. Squares usually have points in signs that are of the same mode but of different elements. For instance, Aquarius is squaring Scorpio, but they're both fixed signs. So kind of what a square does is it's a disagreement. It's not seeing things from the same angle. It's both looking at the same thing and saying, I disagree with you. I don't agree with that. And so what has to happen is work. And a square is kind of like your elbow or your knee, where you straighten it and that's what makes the movement. So usually there is some kind of action required, and the more you take this action, the more you exercise this, the stronger you're going to be because of it. And so usually people with a lot of squares in their charts, they view things as very difficult. And they get so good at doing difficult things that they can actually go a lot farther in life than people with a grand trine or very flowy aspects. Like those squares actually help them in the long run because they have to overcome little oppositions so often that when the big ones come around, it doesn't really bother them because they've been overcoming oppositions ever since they were born, it feels like. So we got the square. Now let's talk about the sesquiquadrate. So the sesquiquadrate is basically a square and a half. It's not as intense as the actual square, but you still feel it. And it's almost like instead of there being a direct blockage, there's a lot of little speed bumps along the way, a lot of little blockages between you and your goal. And so there is a need to take action, a need to resolve something, but there's all these little steps that you have to take beforehand, these little oppositions that you have to overcome in order to get to your goal. All right, so you have two sesquiquadrates funneling into an apex planet with a square at the end. So this is why it's called a Hammer of Thor, is because this is a very intense thing to have in your birth chart. The idea of the Hammer of Thor is it's very heavy, and when it strikes, everything gets wiped out. And so in order to be able to lift this, it takes a lot of effort. When you have a Hammer of Thor in your birth chart, it's usually, you usually have this feeling of something needs to be accomplished. You need to become something. Something needs to happen. And it's really, really hard. Like it's something that you have to work really hard in order to get. And then when you finally do get it, you get it big time. And so if you have this, you can have the sense of feeling unsettled, like feeling like something's got to give, something's got to change. It's not exactly like the classic yod where you have the sextile and then the two quincunxes where it's more of like an irritating aspect, like more of a psychological need. This is more of like a drive issue where you have very intense drive. You feel like there are all these little things in between you and your goal. And then once you reach your goal, you reach it big. And it's like this big moment. However, very short-lived because this is part of your chart signature. It is part of you. And so you're always going to have this need to change, to move, to become better. So usually when people have this aspect in their natal chart, a lot of stuff happens to them and they make a lot of stuff happen. Like they have really great drive. They have great charisma, like just that like essence of I am going to do this and it is going to happen. In younger years, they can be more of like a rebel, like going against the grain, stuff like that. It's not necessarily that they do it just to do it. If something doesn't make head sense to them, they're not okay with it. Like they are going to push and overcome and push and overcome and push and overcome their entire lifetime. This is such a gift to have in the birth chart because it's like your life is a series of great accomplishments, great struggles and overcoming. It can be very hard. It can be very hard to kind of house this within your soul. But that's the part where you take a step back and you just look at everything you've been through. Look at everything you've overcome. Look at who you are now. And honestly, it's kind of exciting to see from my perspective in a chart because it's like, look at all you've done. Like, look at how much you have grown, how much you have accomplished. So if you have this in your birth chart, I am very interested to know how it's going. I love it when you guys tell me like exactly what the aspects are and everything like that. It's super fun for me to go back and read. I don't have infinite time to reply to every single comment, but I do read them all and I am very grateful for what you guys are adding. I hope you guys have a great day and best of luck.